Hello to everybody.
We are Noah.
And Litzy.
I'm a PhD student in sociology at the University of California, Santa Barbara, researching urban agriculture and urban food forests as cracks in the concrete of the cities where life can grow and regenerate. And I'm part of the organizing group of the Isla Vista Food Forest.
I just got a PhD in urban and environmental planning at the University of Catania in Italy, and I am passionate about social, urban justice, and ecological design. And during my period as a Fulbright visiting researcher at the University of California, Santa Barbara, I have explored in depth the social and environmental justice studies, and I have been involved in the Isla Vista Food Forest project.
We're very glad to participate in the conference, Reimagining our Worlds from Below, Transnational Conversations on Resistance, Movements, and Transformations, and in particular in the session, From the Global to the Grassroots, Fostering Transnational and Intersectoral Exchange in Participatory Practices and Methodologies.
In this session, we will share with you our presentation, which is titled Creating a Commons in the 21st Century, Reflections from the Experience of an Urban Food Forest in California. With this video, we aim to link the theme of common with the one of justice and democracy by discussing the challenges and achievements of the participatory process behind innovative socio-ecological justice experiences. We want to investigate and question how community-based and interspecies justice-based experiences can become practices of commons and enact alternative ways to live in our world.
So the idea of this session comes from the observation of the current context of social and ecological breakdown that demands organized collective action to envision and build socio-ecological alternatives to generate a livable world for humans and among all beings. On one side, a strand of thought argues that the increase of investment and privatization will be the best way to manage urban and agricultural resources. On another side, supporters of neo-institutionalism state that the public institutions should be the ones in charge of managing available resources. Both solutions somehow are in line with the theories of the tragedy of the commons, according to which, without a top-down system of governance, the only possible result is the overexploitation due to self-interested action.
As an alternative dichotomy, there is a third path. Elinor Ostrom demonstrates that governing the commons, or better, self-governing the commons, is possible and implies local communities who are able to do this without top-down regulations and privatization. Sharing the governance and responsibilities can address at the same time democratic, justice, and ecological issues. And in our perspective, urban farms, including urban food forests, concentrate this combination very well.
This is why we will talk about one particular case of an urban food forest that's being planted on public land in Isla Vista, California. We have participated in its implementation since April 2021 with a community of volunteers and with local public authorities. We will present this case with the participation of Tony Barbero, designer and co-founder of this project.
Hi, my name is Tony Barbero. I'm an agroecologist living in Santa Barbara, and I am the designer and original founder of the Food Forest.
We also thank Ash Valenti, another co-founder of the project, for the video recordings that we'll share depicting the construction of the food forest.
And Urban food forests are a community nature-based practice that seek to tackle problems such as ecological destruction, reduction of biodiversity, food insecurity, and the loss of community bonds, aiming at ecological regeneration, food justice, and sense of community. This practice is becoming progressively popular in many countries across the world, and urban food forests are kind of different from other forms of community gardens, as Tony has explained us.
The food forest in Isla Vista seeks to respond to the social context of systemic inequalities of the United States, particularly present in the local community of Isla Vista, where food insecurity, both among students and among community residents, reaches approximately half of the population.
Some context of our whole philosophy behind this project was obviously, we live in a very scary world with climate change and loss of biodiversity. A lot of studies are showing about 2/3 of all species of plants and animals are headed towards extinction currently. And on top of that, there's billions of people who are food insecure in the world every year. Within this community of Isla Vista, both of these problems are very much a huge threat. For instance, you used to see, in terms of biodiversity loss, lots of mammals have been leaving this area. About 20, 30 years ago, you've seen lots of foxes in Isla Vista, which are now regionally extinct. Traditionally, the land now known, or so-called Isla Vista, is built upon the ancestral Chumash village of Anascoyo, which refers to a plant species you no longer see anywhere in this elevation in this area either. And in addition to that, 50% of UCSB residents, which is the main residents of Isla Vista, tend to be UCSB students, are food insecure, according to UCSB's environmental studies program. And the non-UCSB students that live in the Isla Vista community tend to be low-income workers, city college students, immigrants, unhoused people that are only more likely or just as likely to be food insecure as UCSB students. So with this food forest project, we sought to create a little oasis of biodiversity and a place where people could eat and gather for free, because that's a big part about the commons, not just a place to create your own means of sustaining yourself, but a place to exist without an expectation of spending money.
From an organizational point of view, the Food Forest Project is the fruit of a collaboration of the EcoVista Collective and the Isla Vista Recreation and Parks District, the public institution responsible for the management of local parks in Isla Vista.
Yeah, so we started the process of the food forest and planning it in 2019. The idea was conceptualized as part of the EcoVista project. And then we started proposing it to the Parks Department in Isla Vista in 2020. It was met with kind of like a lot of reluctance. People are really reluctant to make permanent changes in the community, especially a really transient community. But the whole goal of this project and the design philosophy is how can we make this project as little maintenance as possible by using like native plants and really low maintenance plants. Which every ecosystem is going to have some kind of plants that are like food producing that require minimal work. But yeah, so obviously in 2020, we all know what happened in March. It really, really, really kind of was like a shot in the knee to us, and it really slowed down the process for quite a while. It took about a year, literally a year of just planning, negotiating, all kinds of stuff, with people in the community, with the parks department. We had to have people show up to meetings and like request that this is something we want to talk about. People in the community want to see this. That's really important, as the public support. Um, but yeah, so after a year in January 2021 is when we actually planted. And it's not just like we did the negotiation and planted. We like went there while it was raining to see how water flowed on the landscape. The food forest is the site of an illicit road dump. So there's a bunch of asphalt buried. It's been bulldozed multiple times. So basically every time it rained, the water would just pool up on the land. It wouldn't even be able to soak in the ground. Like the grass that was growing there couldn't even grow to its full height. Like the full 4-inch turf grass could not even be achieved. So obviously that was a huge challenge. So what we would have to do, of course, is till the soil, which typically no-till agriculture is something you see brought up a lot in regenerative agriculture circles. This is, I like to think of a single till. We did, we tilled it, we removed the sod, we added in lots of mulch, compost, fungi, inoculants, all kinds of stuff. And then we planted our fruit trees. And I think only like less than a month after we planted, we had a huge rainstorm, and every single tree was sitting in like a pool of standing water, which is of course a disaster. Potentially every tree in the project could have died that day. And we had the community come out, and we had like 10-20 people come and pump all the water out, and we had food not bombs come and like serve us all food. And a bunch of people came together and really saved the project. Honestly, a few trees died, but honestly it's better that they died, because when you're planning a project like this, like a public one, you don't want trees that you're going to continually have to nurse back to health year after year, because you're not going to be there to do that. Like me and all these people in the project are volunteers. We're not getting paid. We have full-time jobs. Most people are students in addition. So you want what's going to be low maintenance. So in a way, you're selecting for the strongest, hardiest plants by finding the ones that can withstand drought and storm conditions and such things.
The Food Forest project has entailed the involvement of different institutional and civic actors, and also diverse sectors of the local community.
Right. So, like I said, 80% of Isla Vista is students. So the primary people we have showing up to our volunteer days are students, which is great. Students are really open-minded in general. They tend to care about stuff like this, like the environment. UCSB is a really good culture of caring about the environment, and a lot of their students, at least. So that's been really awesome to see. The flip side of that is Isla Vista students, it's a very transitory community. I've been trying to find other people who can kind of take over my role after I move out of this community, because the rent is really high here and wages are really low. It's not a sustainable place to live long term for most folks. So finding that has been really difficult, because I'll find someone who's interested in becoming like a core member, but they're already in their third year of college, and by the time I'm out of this community in a year or two, they're already out of the community as well. So it's like a constant cycle of replacement, which is a really big problem with Isla Vista organizing in general. It's about half the struggle, I would say, with setting up any org in IV is continuing it going after the original founders have left. So recently we've reached out to the Isla Vista Tenants Union, and we have a collaboration with them in the works. And they represent, well, all Isla Vista tenants, but a lot of long-term community residents, because 20% of this community is long-term residents. And that includes families, children, migrants, that kind of thing. Having cross collaboration and education and just sharing different gardening tips is a great thing, because many of them are gardeners as well. And they probably don't even know about our project, especially people who English is not their first language. So I think that is a really key feature in this project, because I want to institutionalize it, integrating it into UCSB's programs like their environmental affairs board, potentially having collaborations with them or other classes at UCSB would be a good way to keep the students cycling through. But we also cannot forget the 20% of people who are long-term residents.
So the participation of such a varied community has been a process made of different moments, experiments, and steps. Tony explained us in which way the community got involved over time and which initiatives have been carried on.
Sheet mulching, which is a way of weed suppression and organic soil building and then planting. So that was like 2 or 3 days for the initial project. And then, we had that storm, and then we had another huge day, an emergency day, volunteer day, where everyone came out and kind of saved the forest. That was really nice. And then, there was a couple trees that died in that. So we had, after that, there was a lot of days where it was like a couple, like 5 people would come out or whatever and plant a tree to replace another tree that died. We experimented with some like tropical trees and stuff that didn't really do that well. Um, at the end of the day, I kind of like to say, what's the most like foolproof trees you can have in this climate? If you look around, you see loquat trees, for instance, a lot.
Therefore, to practice and to become common, to practice commons and to become commons is not a linear path, but it is a curvy and discontinuous one. And for sure, it includes both high ability to self-organize and the ability of sharing the caring of a common space or of a community urban forest.
I think a big part of how to build this commons is to look in the context of this project and this community we have. I think, don't quote me on this, but I was talking to my associates of the Tenants Union. I think Isla Vista has a 70% poverty rate or something like that. Most people here are barely scraping by and paying rent. And I think a big part of this is like the Parks Department is this partnership has a lot of resources and a lot of money. And food forest, they need to have someone who's, because basically for a garden, there's just they're the constant in this community. They're gonna be here when I'm gone and when other people are gone. So having them do very simple, like once a month check to make sure all the irrigation is still running. Once every couple months, fertilize all the trees, because like I said, fruit trees are higher maintenance than native trees and stuff like that. So having these very simple, basic, a lot of the basic maintenance of a garden that has to be done a couple times a year being done by the public authorities, I think makes the most sense. And that allows, because it's like not like we can get volunteers to show up at 7:30 in the morning and check if all the irrigation is running right to all the fruit trees. So having a public institution that'll steadily doing that year after year will allow the food forest to continue to grow. And the thing about this, and I think this is the whole thing about establishing the commons it goes back to, is this is such a young project. It won't reach peak production or like start getting into like peak production until 10 or 20 years down the line. Then we're gonna have like trees that are producing hundreds of thousands of calories a year and like 10 of those. So like we're talking about like potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of calories a year for free that could be handed out to people in this community. And that's when I really think the commons will come in. And also when that ecosystem is so established, the problem of like weeds and other invasive species will be so much lower. The maintenance will be so much lower. So really it's about how do we get both the community and the public authorities to just nurse this thing along until it's to the point where the maintenance is less frequently required, and then it becomes sustainable for volunteers to be able to go in and work it every once in a while, just because it's very difficult for most people at UCSB are slams. Most people who are working to pay their own rent and at UCSB are also slammed, even more slammed. So um, it's a difficult process because we don't exist in the time of pre-capitalism where land was held in common. So it's just different material conditions, and it's like, how are we going to alleviate those conditions? And I think like having an agreement with the state to do some of the most basic maintenance, allowing the community to kind of take the reins by just doing the basic maintenance of like irrigation and fertilization in order to get this project to the next level, is the way it's going to establish the commons.
And I think that
Well, the thing about it is like, so I think one really important thing for our garden is you should be going around and checking that the irrigation is all working. You know what I'm saying? And it's really hard to tell a volunteer, do you want to get up at 7 in the morning on a Sunday or a Monday and go and see if the water lines are broken and then fix them, you know, and then we would have to like all this grant money to reimburse these people. Whereas like the Parks Department's on the ground is already going around in the morning. So I think it just makes much more sense for them to like have a worker or two on site, make sure there's not any burst lines, and if there is like one burst line, spend like a couple minutes to fix it. It's really easy to do. I've done for a living too. And then they have all the materials to fix it, versus like it doesn't really make sense for us to buy a bunch of bulk irrigation repair when the Parks Department can already do this, and we'd have to have it reimbursed through grants for like a 50-cent thing. It just doesn't make much sense to me. um that that I think makes a lot of sense, is having them to maintain the irrigation, because that wouldn't be that many hours of work a week. It'd be less than one a month probably. um I think fertilization, it doesn't necessarily have to be something they do. That could also be done at volunteer days. That's just something that should happen like once every like couple months, you know. It's different for different trees. The more complex the system is, of course, the more complex the fertilization routine is, because of these are like fruit trees that are delicate in ways that other trees aren't. So having the public authorities be somewhat accountable, and that like having an agreement that they're going to do some base work that like it doesn't really make sense for volunteers to do, I think is a good idea.
So, some final reflections about the biggest difficulties, challenges, and achievements of becoming a commons nowadays can be made according also to Tony experience.
The most challenging thing is that the concept of commons is like not really a thing in our society anymore, and really wanting it to be, but like we're trying to fit something into a system that hasn't allowed the commons and destroyed the commons 500 years ago. And that's really difficult when it's like, sure, we could hold land communally and grow food communally, and that could be kind of what the food forest is, but also, like I said, you know, like we don't get to live off the land. Like we don't get to like, we still have bills to pay, and like working a wage labor while also doing a project of the commons is really tricky to balance, on top of being a student for me. um I think it's the same with like a lot of people. I've like a lot of volunteers have like said they wanted to come out to something, but like they couldn't. And then of course doing it within the context also of the coronavirus pandemic has been especially challenging to a common project, because this is one of the driving forces of alienation, or should I say, it's the main accelerant of the effect of alienation in our society, because we have all these people separated. We're not talking in person. Like right now, we're talking over the internet. Uh, like we were like had one of our members of our group was like gonna go help me pick up a tree in his pickup truck, and he almost got coronavirus. He had to separate. I had coronavirus for 3 weeks. I couldn't work. It's caused a lot of chaos among our organization. So that's been a huge challenge. I'd say a big part of the benefit though is I've seen a lot of people who were part of the unhoused community in our area who like became part of our project and helped me out because they were getting free food, free guavas or figs and herbs and stuff. A lot of people came and gathered food and ate it there, which is really cool to see. Because it's really hard as an unhoused person to get fresh produce. You know, you have nowhere to store it; it goes bad very quickly. So picking it right off the tree and eating it doesn't get much more fresh than that. And then similar projects like the Methodist Garden, connecting with some of the people working there has also been really awesome. And sharing kind of resources and tips and like stuff like that. So yeah, that's been a huge part, is like the solidarity of like the unhoused community, and like seeing and telling them, telling us how this project has made their lives better.
Based on our first-hand data as researchers and activists involved in this project of the food forest, and based on the empirical experience and stories told by Tony, it has come to light that commons require self-organization, time, caring for the common places, as well as the ability to engage with the diverse sectors of the local community.
Also, it has emerged that commons aimed to achieve socio-ecological justice question the role of public authorities. And finally, the experience shed light on the fact that there is still a vivid tension between all the parts which are involved in the project, but it is a tension that can be also a generative tension.
We'll be very glad to go more in depth on some issues if you would like to reach out to us.
And thank you very much for being with us, and feel more than free to contact us and keep conversing with us.
See you soon.